By the time 2001 rolled around, it was official. Resident Evil had come a long way from its original 1996 game and is now a household name. With the iconic original PlayStation trilogy, a successful spin-off with others in development, and a theatrically released film, RE was a train that had no sign of stopping. But while everyone at Capcom was busy looking ahead, one man was busy looking back. That man in particular was Shinji Mikami, the father of Resident Evil, who didn't share the same positive mindset of the first RE game that everyone else did. While it was widely regarded as a masterpiece, Mikami knew that it could be better, and with the new generation of consoles, Mikami was convinced that a remake was in order. Honoring his new Nintendo GameCube contract, the game was going to be a Nintendo GameCube exclusive and utilize its tech to make a game closer to his original vision. At first, the game was essentially going to be a reskin of the original, but halfway through development, multiple aspects of the original were changed altogether. After an exhausting final 2 months of crunch, Resident Evil Remake hit store shelves on March 22, 2002, exactly 6 years after the original game released. The game was available for Nintendo GameCube, but would later be ported to both the Wii and then eventually modern consoles. Resident Evil Remake was my and many others' first glimpse into the rich world of survival horror. If you're a fan of the channel, you'll see me often streaming this game, and you probably caught the quick review I did of it a year back. I'm sorry for the repetition, but just like RE1, RE2, RE3, and Code Veronica, I cannot possibly keep it a secret that I love this game. And I cannot tell you how overjoyed I am to talk about this game once more and fully go over everything that makes it so much of a treasure. With that out of the way, let's talk about
Resident Evil.
Look at this game. Just look at it. I'm not showing you gameplay captured off my PS4 right now. What you're looking at is the original trailer for the game. This is 2002 technology. 2002 technology. Resident Evil Remake looks absolutely stunning in terms of graphical presentation, especially for the time. Code Veronica set a new series standard by making a game look as good as it did while using 3D renders for everything. However, in Remake, they returned to the usage of pre-rendered environments, and as shown here, this was definitely to the game's favor. This is the most detailed pre-rendered environments have ever looked in a game. This move was done to save on memory and make room for other assets, but it not only gives Remake that old school Resident Evil feel, but it makes the game look infinitely more realistic than the alternative. As for the actual 3D models, as you'd expect by now, they look incredible. Human characters have an absurd amount of polish and detail for 2002, along with their outfits. But the main display comes with the zombies, who are probably the most convincing zombies of this time. They look very convincing as walking, decayed, shambling corpses. This amount of detail goes with all the other enemy types too. What you'll also notice are infinitely better cutscenes. Like the previous installments, RE Remake uses both CG and in-game cutscenes interchangeably, with the former being used rarely for important scenes. I will admit, I kinda missed the goofy live action of the first game, but the devs did intend for this remake to be taken much more seriously, and CG was the way to go in that case. Speaking of which, the CG cutscenes look pretty damn good. As for the in-game cutscenes, the new hardware allows for more freedom with the camera to make these scenes much more cinematic. Also, this time around, the main characters were based off of real people, and motion capture was used to make the characters' movements more realistic. Don't get me wrong, there is still a noticeable amount of clunkiness when it comes to character movement, but it is undeniably a far cry from what came before it. As for performances, Capcom has definitely upgraded from the interesting voice work seen in the original.
Chris? Stop it.
To be fair, the voice actors here have far better dialogue to work with. Hetty Anderson does a fantastic job as Jill Valentine, Joe White does a pretty good job of Chris, and is definitely my favorite voice for him up to this point. And the rest of the voice talent, Barry Burton voiced by Ed Smerin, Rebecca Chambers voiced by Hope Levy, and Albert Wesker voiced by Peter Jessup all do the job of taking these characters and making them both realistic and authentic. I haven't even gotten to the soundtrack yet. This game has a phenomenal soundtrack, mostly comprising of remixes from the first game. Each track reflects the ominous, unfamiliar nature of this abandoned mansion, and really helps set the mood. My personal favorite being the remixed save room theme that thankfully carried over from the original. But what about the environments you'll be finding yourself traversing? Well, first there's the mansion, obviously. In my review of the original game, I noted that the walls of the mansion lacked much detail, but this is nowhere to be seen in the remake. Each room is given enough detail to make the mansion much more convincing. There's also a newly added outside area that reminds you of the cold, dangerous forest surrounding you. The residence is this nice, grummy old building that stands out due to its departure from the previous luxurious setting. The Aqua Ring, a flooded facility closed off from the residence. The underground tunnels, a dark, cramped space full of terrors lurking about. And finally, the underground laboratory, which leans more sci-fi now that the true purpose of this mansion has been unveiled. These areas are all super different and provide some nice variety. And places like the Aqua Ring and laboratory have been done justice due to the remake's higher graphical power. I know all I've done is praise this game up and down, but the presentation here is seriously phenomenal for 2002 and still holds up 2 decades later. This game actually turned 25 days ago. That is just insane. The environments are all exceptionally detailed, the performances are the best so far, and the soundtrack is amazing. Seriously, this game looks and sounds phenomenal, especially for the year it released. Despite its undeniable overachiever mindset in terms of visuals, Resident Evil didn't get its iconic rep from visuals alone. There's still gameplay, and boy oh boy does Remake deliver. From the surface, Remake is a simple recreation of the original. You find yourself in a large mansion filled with a variety of vicious creatures, most of which comprising the undead. It is your job to make your way through the mansion by means of exploration and puzzle solving, while simultaneously dispatching the monsters threatening your life with a very tight string of resources you come across. Every decision you make is critical. If you run through all of your ammo, you're screwed. If you find yourself in a tight situation with no healing items, you're screwed. Most of the horror that comes from the game is from the seamless, eerie atmosphere dripping off the walls of the mansion and the management of your resources. Even the most simplest of actions that go without saying in your modern day shooter requires a nice level of critical thinking here, such as which enemies are worth killing. When it comes to controls, the original version of the game uses tank controls like the other games prior. However, the modern ports of the game gives players the option of alternate controls, giving the player more modern day freedom when it comes to your movement. I think this was an excellent way to get modern players behind experiencing the game since the age of tank controls have long since passed, but this presents another problem. You see, the game was not built for alternate controls, meaning it is practically child's play to do what I'm doing on the screen, baiting a zombie for a grab. This is a very minor complaint since first time players will 100% not be experienced enough to let alone attempt it, but let's just say if you're not playing with tank controls on, the zombies are downgraded from being an actual threat to an optional obstacle laughably avoidable. Another option given to you at the start of the game are which 2 playable characters you're willing to play as, Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield. I'll say this right now, Jill Valentine is a way more forgiving option than Chris. I don't know why they made Chris's section so inconvenient compared to Jill, since it discourages anyone from playing him. To elaborate more, Jill has the advantage of 2 additional inventory slots, a lockpick that effortlessly grants you access to a multitude of doors, exclusive access to the grenade launcher, and minor conveniences such as early access to weapons. With Chris, you can take more damage and you have free heals, but you only have 6 inventory slots, you have to fetch old keys to open doors Jill has immediately access to, and you have minor inconveniences revolving specific situations. I'm not entirely sure if Chris being more difficult to play as was an intentional decision, but regardless, I kinda wish the characters were balanced more so I wouldn't just play Jill every time I want to revisit the game. But what enemies will be threatening both Jill and Chris? Well, the most obvious and the most common are zombies, the rotting walking corpses whose primary job are to drain you of both your ammunition and health. After them are the Cerberuses, who are once again formidable monsters who are not to be taken lightly. Seriously, these mutts are the most vicious they've ever been this time around. They attack without mercy, tend to show in large numbers, and have an insta-kill move. Yikes. Moving on is the crows, who would do nothing but peck at you and cause minor damage. After that are the spiders, who once again return, and despite them triggering my arachnophobia once again, they're relatively harmless. Sure, they spit acid at you and even have a tackle, but they're super easy to dodge. Same goes for the sharks, who make a very minor appearance and will at most get 1 bite out of you. Unlike the hunters, monsters that will infest the mansion upon your second visit, who are terrifyingly quick, vicious, and as their name implies, will hunt you down. They're less scarier but just as cool cousins are the chimeras. Insect-like creatures who have had a massive upgrade since the original. Instead of mainly sticking to the ceiling, they also have no problem completely rushing you. While they're easy to take out, they were a nice change of pace even though the game already has some killer variety. But any sub-bosses? Well, yes. If you're an RE fan of any kind, Lisa Trevor absolutely needs no introduction. This bundle of nightmares was actually a cut idea from the original game, and it can be reasonably inferred and inspired the likes of Mr. X, who would then go on to inspire Nemesis. Lisa is an unkillable monster that will show up periodically throughout the game to hunt you down. While that in itself is haunting, I'll be sure to cover Lisa much more in the story section. The second sub-boss I can think of is Neptune, a giant-ass shark who was actually added in the remake. Neptune is responsible for triggering a sequence in the Aqua Ring that will force you to quickly restabilize the control room and drain the facility of its water, or else the giant shark will crash into the room, flooding you in the process. Afterwards, you have to face Neptune one last time. After putting 2 and 2 together, you'll put an end to the monster via some good old-fashioned electrocution. I think adding a main shark to deal with during the Aqua Ring gave the area much more personality than it originally had. However, sub-bosses are one thing. The first of the main big bad boss fights are the Elder Crimson Head, essentially a zombie on steroids with increased speed, durability, and strength. Going into this fight without a shotgun would make it pretty difficult, but otherwise it's not too bad. After that is Plant 42, a large, intelligent plant that utilizes its tentacle and poison to defend itself. This fight isn't too bad, however you can skip it by building the V-Jolt, a chemical agent that allows you to skip the fight entirely. This goes for both the original and remake, but I really like this mechanic. It's a nice reward for more vigilant players who pay more attention to the notes they read and what's around the environment. And after that is Yon the Snake. You actually encounter Yon earlier in the game, but you're forced to fight it later once you enter the library. Like you'd expect from an actual snake, Yon is quick with its movement and will strike at a moment's notice. Though you should be fine as long as you have decent equipment on you. Next is Black Tiger, a spider who has the exact same moveset as a typical spider, except it's big and takes way more damage. All in all, it's a piece of cake. Just like Lisa Trevor, who you later face in the game, during your final dance with Lisa Trevor, you need to push off 4 surrounding stones to reveal the contents of a tomb in the center of the platform, which will get Lisa to jump off your back for good. The only tricky part of this fight is the fact that Lisa can very easily knock you off if you're not careful, but you have Burial or Wesker assisting you, they can stun her long enough to cover you. And finally there's the Tyrant. The first fight is laughably easy and may come off as a little anticlimactic. That's until you meet him once again on the helipad of the mansion. This time around, the Tyrant will be much faster, more aggressive, and durable. A very appropriate foe to cap off such a perilous journey. So yeah, the boss fights in this game aren't crazy good or anything like that. However, they do succeed at giving certain areas and goals much more importance and personality, and will also add to the player's long list of reasons to why resource conservation is such a necessity. Wait, am I forgetting something? Oh yeah, my bad, only the coolest mechanic the remake introduces. Yeah, meet the Crimson Heads. For context, remember how I said you have to think really carefully about which zombies you kill? Yeah, well that's because the disposal of a zombie will result in a Crimson Head taking its place. Fast and relentless versions of the zombies that will either match or even surpass your speed. This makes the game infinitely engaging in a number of ways. In Resident Evil, killing zombies was usually an inconvenience since it cost you some valuable ammo, but here it's treated as a direct punishment. The only way you can prevent the transformation of a Crimson Head is by destroying their heads or burning their bodies with oil that you're limited on. Not to mention, you may not always have the guarantee or the lighter if you're playing as Jill in your inventory. This is such an awesome mechanic that unfortunately never came back after this entry. So with all those threats I just went over, you're probably thinking you'll need a good arsenal to defend yourself. Well, you'd be right. First is the survival knife that you want to immediately put away. Second is the handgun, your first love of the game. It does an okay job at handling zombies, but it's clear you're not going to be able to rely on this thing forever. Enter the shotgun.
I got a shotgun.
A 6-shelled powerhouse extremely useful for quick and easy decapitations. Not to mention it can knock both Cerberus and Hunters right back onto their asses. Then there's the assault shotgun, Richard's shotgun that you obtain at different points in the game depending on who you're playing as. If you're playing as Joel, you can use it after the first Yon encounter if you saved Richard. As Chris, you gain access to it in the Aqua Ring if you saved Richard. I'm not sure whether it has a higher damage output than the normal shotgun, but its larger cartridge is reason enough to obtain it. Then there's the Magnum revolver that you can unlock by doing a side puzzle. This Magnum is definitely one of the most powerful weapons in the game, which explains the insanely low amount of ammo drops you get from it. It can one-shot pretty much every normal enemy in the game, but I tend to save it for the final boss. Switching over to character-exclusive weapons, Jill gets the grenade launcher, a powerful launcher that can take grenade, acid, and flame rounds. It probably doesn't even need to be stated, but regardless, the grenade launcher is great at dispatching pretty much anything, and there's usually enough ammo given to you to warrant its usage in both sub-bosses and main boss fights. Unfortunately, Chris gets the flamethrower, a weapon that not only barely does shit, but is also exclusive to the underground section. See what I mean when I say playing as Chris is just unappetizing? The last thing you can unlock in the main game is Barry's revolver, a magnum that even surpasses the normal magnum in terms of sheer power. The only drawback is obtaining this gun does come at the cost of getting a good ending. So yeah, that's all the main weapons you can use in the game, and like I said in the original review, they provide some nice variety and all serve a specific function while playing. Well, maybe except the flamethrower. But that's all of the main story weapons. I never said anything about unlockable ones. If you manage to beat the game in just under 5 hours, you'll gain access to the Samurai's Edge, a handgun that's not only more powerful than the average handgun, but also has infinite ammo. But what do you get for a 3-hour run or less? Well, my good friend, say hello to the Infinite Rocket Launcher, a legendary reward also seen in the original games that's a one-shot to every single enemy in the game. Yeah, to say the least, it makes speedrunning the game pretty much worth it. But that's not all the replayability this game has to offer. There's also Village Survivor mode, an extra difficulty that automatically puts the game on hard, disables auto-aim, it makes it to where item boxes don't connect, meaning you have to think carefully about what item boxes you use. Your reward for beating that mode is of course another difficulty mode, Invisible Enemies mode, where every single enemy in the game is invisible. Sounds fun, right? Seriously, playing this game makes the experience way more terrifying than a normal playthrough, and it's a very fun way to spice things up and challenge yourself. And there's also a multitude of costumes you can unlock for both Chris and Jill, and there's some nice looking costumes. The replayability this game offers is absolutely insane, and with that, we end off the gameplay portion of this review. And I just want to conclude by saying Resident Evil Remake not only elevates from the original game by having a timeless and solid survival horror experience, but the loads of replayability it offers will keep you playing for hours on end. Shinji Mikami and the rest of the dev team really knocked it out of the park with this one. But the one thing Resident Evil games have consistently delivered is an engaging story to complement the excellent gameplay. And RE Remake is tasked with recreating the events of the original in a modernized fashion, and absolutely does not disappoint, which immediately becomes apparent with the opening.
Alpha Team is flying around the forest zone situated in northwest Raccoon City, where we are searching for the helicopter of our compatriots, Bravo Team, who disappeared during the middle of their mission. Bizarre murder cases have recently occurred in Raccoon City. There are outlandish reports of families being attacked by a group of about 10 people. Victims were apparently eaten. The Bravo Team was sent in to investigate, but we lost contact.
Look, Chris.
Bravo Team's helicopter was a derelict. Save for the remaining body of Kevin.
This way. Damn it! Make for that mansion!
This intro is probably the absolute best in the series. It establishes what's going on with very few sentences, and the creepy atmosphere of Raccoon Forest, followed by the grisly slaughter of Joseph Frost, makes for a pretty effective opening. Alpha Team takes refuge in this mysterious mansion. Our main group of characters consists of Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, who will be introduced later on, and Captain Albert Wesker. If you're playing as Jill, you're stranded with Wesker and Barry, with Chris having gone missing. If you're playing as Chris, you're with Jill and Wesker. Both characters go in to investigate a little further when they make a horrifying discovery. There is more to this mansion than meets the eye. No matter which character you're playing as, they're either stranded or decide to split up. It's here where you start exploring this creepy mansion and start uncovering a plethora of cryptic information. For one, you realize that this mansion was used as a base of sorts for some mysterious corporation. You also hear of a man by the name of George Trevor taking refuge within the mansion itself, apparently on the run. When playing as Jill, your main ally is Barry, who's a lovable goofball.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
When playing as Chris, you have two allies, with the main one being Rebecca Chambers, a member of Bravo team who's the lone survivor along with Richard. It's clear she's not as experienced in the field as the others, but she has a confident attitude and is determined to do whatever she can to help her teammates. Your other ally is Captain Wesker, your badass and reserved captain. These characters, including Chris and Jill, are all really lovable. Eventually, your character comes across Richard, who's been bitten by some sort of giant snake. It's optional whether you save him or not, but to make things simpler, let's just say he survives in both stories. When playing as Jill, Richard joins you in fighting Jan and sacrifices himself to save Jill from being devoured by the creature. Talk about an MVP. Once your character obtains the stone or metal object, they go deep into the forest where they're warned of an unkillable monster in chains. It's of course not too long before you encounter this monster in person, who has a mask comprised of human faces. Fun. The only hint you get to this monster's origin is a journal showing its want to reunite with its mother. Both Jill and Chris continue forward, make it to the residence. It's here where Jill starts noticing some oddly suspicious behavior from Barry. As Chris, once you make it to the Aqua Ring, it's here where Richard meets his demise by saving Chris from Neptune. No matter how he goes, he always goes out saving his teammates. What an absolute legend. Neptune is killed, and Plan 42 follows afterwards. It's here where Chris breaks the news of Richard's death to Rebecca, who appears to be taking it all right at first. But if you go back and get healed by her, this happens.
Thanks. Be strong, Rebecca.
I've always found this scene of Rebecca losing her cool and breaking down in front of Chris really heartbreaking, and it's really the first time we see someone in this game mourn the loss of an ally. Both of our characters come across Wesker. In the Jill story, Wesker also notices some strange behavior being exhibited by Barry. The two continue, and you find out through notes that this mission was actually a front for illegal experimentation, resulting in the creation of something called the Tyrant Virus, otherwise known as the T-Virus, which is responsible for all these roaming monsters. We also find out George Trevor was the architect who made the mansion, and afterwards he was betrayed by the head of the mansion, Oswald E. Spencer, and left to rot. This game has a really satisfying explanation to the background of this nefarious mansion, and it's really cool in your first playthrough to piece everything together with the information you're slowly given. Jan is eventually killed, and our characters go deeper underground during a newly revealed passage where they encounter Enrico, the captain of Bravo's team, currently wounded. He mentions something about a traitor in the midst of stars when he's shot by an unknown assailant. Jill meets up with Barry and they descend deeper underground, encountering the monster in chains once more. But when she comes back to the elevator, she is left for dead by Barry. Both Jill and Chris continue through the underground and come across a journal. It turns out this monster in chains is George Trevor's daughter, Lisa Trevor, who, along with her mother, was subjected to experimentation after George was betrayed. All she wants to do is reunite with her mother, making Lisa arguably the most tragic monster in the series. She was just a little girl when she was tortured and turned into a monster who longs to be reunited with her mother. It's some genuinely dark shit, and it really hammers in the cruel nature of what went on in this facility. As Jill, you meet Barry and steal his gun. Before she can get answers, Lisa Trevor confronts the two. You are then given a choice. You can either give Barry his gun back, or you can choose to keep it from him, which will get him killed. Obviously, we're continuing with Jill saving Barry. As Chris, you confront Lisa with the help of Wesker. After pushing off the 4 stones keeping the casket in the center of the platform sealed, the corpse of Lisa's mother is revealed. Now being with her mother once again, Lisa takes her and jumps off the platform. Both the characters now make it to the lab where all the sick experiments took place. They look through a slideshow and, oh, that one Umbrella employee looks very familiar. After restoring power to the elevator, our characters confront their treacherous captain.
Wesker.
So you've come. Chris, you make me proud. But of course you are one of my men.
Thanks.
Thank you, Barry.
Well, what do you know?
Oh, don't blame Barry for everything. I hear that his better half and 2 lovely daughters will be in danger if he doesn't do everything I tell him to.
Since when, Wesker?
I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about.
Since when have they been slipping you a paycheck?
I think you're a bit confused.
You're just a slave of Umbrella.
Smart girl, but I think you misunderstand me. The things you mention are nothing. I'll burn all of them along with this entire laboratory. Barry, go up on the ground and wait there. The Tyrant virus leaked, polluting this whole place, and unfortunately, I had to give up my lovely members of STARS.
You killed them with your own dirty hands! You son of a bitch!
No.
Oh yes, dear. Just like this.
Becca!
Don't move!
You and Umbrella took his family, you bastard.
Umbrella? Well, I used some carrots and sticks to cow him, but it had nothing to do with Umbrella. I just used Barry for my personal interests. Though both you and Barry seemed to think I was following Umbrella's orders.
What? What are you planning?
I guess it's time for show and tell. The ultimate life form. Tyrant.
Wesker, you've become senile.
Chris, you'll never understand. It's magnificent. You know, I hate goodbyes.
Barry!
Forgive me.
No, you're not to blame. It's Umbrella and Wesker.
Even if it meant my family, I couldn't bear turning my back on my friends again. Shit! Damn it!
Jill and Barry together. In hell.
You want a piece of me?
What? Premature.
No, Barry! You viral cultured freak!
Our characters fight off the newly released Tyrant and realize the self-destruction of the facility has been activated, either by Rebecca or Wesker depending on who you're playing. The character you're playing saves the other who was locked away by Wesker, and your group makes it out of the mansion and find a way to signal Brad, the pilot. But what's a Resident Evil game without one last surprise? After fending off against Umbrella's ultimate creation, your character defeats it with one blast of your newly acquired missile launcher. Badass. Depending on who you're playing or what choices you made during the game, your ending can differ. Lone survivor endings are depressing as fuck, but the more hopeful and optimistic endings see everyone in your story happily flying off into the sunset. And that was Resident Evil Remake's story. Yeah, it's pretty damn good. While not anything crazy, especially for today's standards, the main group of characters are memorable enough, Wesker's betrayal is a perfect way to spice up the story, and the lore surrounding the true nature of this mansion is awesome and well delivered. Mix all that with the game's grounded visuals and performances, and you have yourself an excellent recreation of the first game's narrative. In conclusion, Resident Evil Remake is one of the best games of all time. I seriously mean that. The visuals are extraordinary for 2002, the soundtrack is masterful, the survival horror gameplay is at its most refined, the puzzles are all fun to do, there's great variety in enemies and weapons, and the game has a simple but well-told and memorable story that can change depending on your choices. Oh, and the game has loads and loads of replayability. This game is a masterpiece, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, due to it quite literally being perfect in every way. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, then please like and subscribe, and as always, I will see you guys next time. Peace out.